The day I died did not feel holy. It felt loud, confusing, and unfinished, like a sentence cut off before the final word. I remember the sound of something metal hitting the floor, a glass breaking, someone shouting my name as if they were very far away. Then a crushing pressure inside my chest. Then silence. My last clear thought was trying to whisper Bismillah like I had done before every exam, every journey, every important moment of my life. But this time, the word never finished leaving my mouth. Darkness swallowed everything before I could finish the prayer. At first, I thought I was sleeping, but sleep has dreams and drifting thoughts. This was different. This was emptiness without weight, silence without sound, existence without a body. I could not feel my hands. I could not feel my breathing. I could not even feel the ground beneath me. I was just aware, floating in nothing. My first thought surprised me. I thought, so this is death. My second thought was calmer than I expected. I am ready. I had been a good Muslim woman. I prayed 5 times a day without missing. I memorized long chapters of the Quran before I was 15. I obeyed my parents. I protected my reputation. I stayed away from anything forbidden. If anyone deserved peace after death, I believed I did. So I waited. I expected angels. I expected what I had always been told would come next. I expected beings of light to guide me toward my reward. Instead, there was only white. Endless white without walls or sky or direction. No sun, no shadows, no horizon. Just brightness without a source. I tried to speak and my voice sounded strange, like it was coming from inside my thoughts instead of my mouth. I said, Allah? Nothing answered. I tried again, louder. Allah, I am here. Still nothing. A small fear began to grow inside me. I started reciting Al-Fatiha to calm myself, the way I had done since childhood whenever anxiety tried to enter my heart. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. But halfway through, I forgot the next line. I had never forgotten it before, not once. That was the first moment I felt afraid. Not panic, just a quiet question forming. Why am I alone? Then I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, certain. Not threatening, just approaching. I turned toward the sound and saw a man walking toward me through the white light. The first thing I noticed was not his clothing, but his eyes. They were not the eyes of authority I had known all my life. They were not the eyes of teachers measuring performance or elders expecting obedience. They were eyes that seemed to see everything about me and still held kindness. I had never seen that before. He wore white, but it was not the same white around us. His clothing seemed alive, almost like light moving across water. My mind tried to understand. Is this an angel? Then I saw his hands. Scars marked both of them. Not fresh wounds. Old wounds that had healed but were never hidden. Something about those scars made my chest tighten. I asked carefully, "Are you an angel?" He smiled gently and said, "No." His voice felt familiar in a way I could not explain. Then he said my name. Not my family name, not my title. Just my name. Amina. No one had ever said it like that before. Not as duty, not as command. Just as if they truly knew me. My thoughts raced. "How do you know me?" I asked. Instead of answering immediately, he just looked at me with patience I had never experienced from any religious teacher. Finally, I asked what I thought mattered most. Where is Allah? I was faithful. I prayed. I tried to obey. I was told I would meet him. My voice started to tremble. He listened without interrupting. No one had ever listened to my questions like that. When I finished, he spoke softly. "You were searching for God." He paused. "But you did not know me." The words did not make sense to me. "I don't understand," I said quickly. "I believe in God. I always believed. He nodded gently. I know. There was no accusation in his voice, only understanding. Then he said, but you knew about God the way someone knows about the ocean from reading a book. I came so you could know him. My certainty began to crack. Who are you? I asked. Instead of answering, he asked me something unexpected. Amina, how long have you been carrying fear? I answered automatically. I am not afraid. It was the answer I had given my whole life. He did not argue. He just looked at me, and suddenly tears began falling before I understood why. I had not cried like that since I was a little girl. Then he finally answered, I am Isa. My heart felt like it stopped. Jesus, the prophet I was taught to respect but never follow. The prophet I was told Christians misunderstood. This cannot be real, I whispered. He answered, truth does not change because you were told something different. The white light began to fade. Panic filled me. Wait, I said, why am I here? His final words followed me as everything disappeared. You asked for your reward, so I'm showing you the truth. Then I woke up screaming. My name is Amina Al-Harbi. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, people believed I was one of the fortunate ones. I was born into a respected Saudi family, known for discipline, reputation, and religious devotion. My father was a man whose words carried weight in our community. My mother was known as a woman of dignity who raised her daughters to fear God and protect family honor. From the outside, my life looked like a blessing. From the inside, it often felt like I was suffocating quietly behind a beautiful wall nobody else could see. I learned very early that in my world, obedience was not just expected, it was survival. When I was 5 years old, my mother taught me how to cover my hair properly before she taught me how to ride a bicycle. When I was 6, I was already learning to recite the Quran with perfect pronunciation because mistakes were not treated as part of learning but as signs of carelessness. I still remember the sharp sound of a thin wooden stick tapping the table when I misread a verse during my lesson. My teacher did not hit me hard, just enough to teach me that correctness mattered more than comfort. I did not cry. I learned not to cry. I learned that strength meant silence. By the time I was 10, I understood something most children should never have to understand. Love was given when you performed correctly. Approval came when you behaved perfectly, and distance came when you asked too many questions. So I became very good at being the good daughter. I prayed on time. I memorized what I was told. I spoke respectfully. I never allowed anyone to see confusion on my face, even when I felt it growing inside me. People used words like righteous and pure when they described me. They told my parents they were blessed. They told me I would be rewarded by Allah for my devotion. But late at night, when my door was closed and my perfect performance was finished, I sometimes sat on the edge of my bed and felt something I did not have a name for at the time. It was not anger. It was not rebellion. It was just a quiet emptiness that followed me like a shadow. I remember staring at my prayer mat after Isha prayer more than once, asking myself why I felt nothing after doing everything right. I would whisper small prayers like, Allah, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel so far from you when I'm trying so hard to be close? No answer ever came, only silence and the soft hum of the air conditioner. I began to think maybe the problem was my heart. Maybe I was not sincere enough. Maybe I needed stronger faith. That is what we were always told. If you feel distant from God, the fault must be yours. So I tried harder. I added extra fasting days. I listened to more lectures. I forced myself to wake up for additional prayers. Outwardly, I became more religious. Inwardly, I became more tired. By the time I reached university, I had perfected the art of looking peaceful while feeling lost. I studied literature because books gave me a place where questions were allowed to exist without punishment. Your stories became my quiet escape because characters could doubt and struggle and still be understood. In real life, I did not feel that freedom. In real life, I felt like I was acting a role written for me before I was even born. Sometimes I wondered who I might have been if fear was not part of my faith. That thought alone used to scare me, so I buried it quickly whenever it appeared. If you are listening to me right now, maybe you understand this kind of hidden struggle. Maybe you also learned how to smile while something inside you was slowly breaking. Maybe you learned how to say the right religious words while secretly wondering if God actually sees the real you. If that is you, I want you to know you are not strange for asking questions. You are human, and sometimes questions are not the death of faith, but the beginning of real truth. If my story is reaching you somehow, maybe it is because someone else needs to know they are not alone. And if stories like mine matter to you, you can help more people hear them. You can subscribe so testimonies like this do not disappear. You can like this video so it reaches someone scrolling in silence at 2 in the morning. You can share it with someone you care about. You can even write a comment if any part of this feels familiar to your own hidden story. I say this not like an advertisement, but like someone who once believed she was the only one feeling this quiet confusion. Sometimes one story can become a small light for someone sitting in darkness. I did not know then how much my life was about to change. I did not know my questions would soon have consequences. I did not know my safe world would begin to crack. The first crack did not come from rebellion. It came from watching someone I loved suffer while the faith we trusted seemed to do nothing. It began with my younger sister, and the day I realized that doing everything right does not always protect the people you love. That was the day something inside me began to wake up. Even though I did not yet understand what that awakening would cost me. My sister Mariam was 5 years younger than me, but in many ways, she was always braver than I was. Where I learned silence, she still had questions. Where I learned how to hide emotions, she still showed hers openly. She used to laugh loudly, the kind of laugh my mother would sometimes correct by saying, "A good girl does not draw attention to herself." Mariam would try to quiet herself, but 5 minutes later she would be laughing again, and I used to envy that about her. She still had something alive inside her that I felt I had already buried. When she was 19, something changed. At first it was small things. She stopped laughing as much. She stayed longer in her room. She started saying she was tired all the time. My mother said it was just stress. My father said she needed stronger discipline. I remember one night she came into my room and sat on my bed without speaking. I asked her what was wrong. She said nothing at first. Then she said quietly, "Amina, do you think Allah sees everything?" I answered the way I had always been taught. "Of course he does." She looked down at her hands and whispered, "Then why does he not stop bad things?" That question made my stomach tighten. I asked her what she meant, but she shook her head and said, "Forget it." And 2 weeks later, I found out what she had been trying to say. She told me through tears that someone close to our extended family had been touching her in ways that made her feel dirty and afraid. My whole body went cold when she told me. I felt anger rising like fire in my chest. I told her we would tell our parents and it would be stopped immediately. I believed that. I believed righteousness meant protection. I believed truth would matter. I was wrong. When my father heard, his face became hard, not broken. His first question was not about her pain. It was about reputation. He asked if anyone else knew. He asked if she had done anything to encourage attention. I remember feeling confused listening to him. Mariam was shaking, crying, barely able to speak, and somehow she was being questioned like she had done something wrong. The man she accused was quietly spoken to by older men in the family. No police, no public accusation, just warnings to avoid situations that cause temptation. I remember sitting there thinking, what temptation? She is a child. But I did not say it. My sister was told to dress more carefully, told to avoid being alone, told to protect family dignity. The man continued visiting family gatherings. Mariam stopped attending them. That was the first time something inside my faith shifted. Not loudly, not like breaking glass, more like a small crack forming in ice. I kept thinking about the sermons we grew up hearing about justice and protection. I kept thinking about how often we were told Allah defends the oppressed, but I watched my sister become smaller every day. She stopped laughing completely. She stopped arguing. She became quiet like me. One night I heard her crying through the wall between our rooms. I wanted to pray, so I did. I prayed harder than I ever had. I asked Allah to heal her heart, to expose the truth, to bring justice. Days passed, nothing changed. Weeks passed, nothing changed. The man still visited. The silence remained. My sister's eyes looked empty. That was when I experienced something I was too afraid to admit. For the first time in my life, my prayers felt like they were hitting the ceiling and falling back down. I kept praying anyway because stopping felt dangerous. But inside, a small voice kept asking, if Allah is most merciful, why does mercy look like silence? I hated that thought when it came. I would immediately ask forgiveness for even thinking it, but the thought kept returning. Around that time, I started noticing other things too. Sermons about patience seemed to mean accepting injustice. Advice about modesty seemed to apply more to victims than to men causing harm. I started noticing contradictions between what we were told and what I was seeing. Not in books, in real life. That was what made it impossible to ignore. My faith did not collapse that day. It just began to feel heavier, like something I was carrying instead of something carrying me. One night I sat with Mariam while she stared at the floor. I asked her if she still prayed. She said, "I try, but I feel like nobody is listening." I did not know how to answer her because I was beginning to feel the same thing. That night, after everyone slept, I sat alone with my phone in the dark. My heart was beating fast because I knew what I was about to do felt forbidden in a way I could not fully explain. I opened a browser window. I stared at the search bar for almost 5 minutes before typing anything. My hands were shaking. I kept thinking, if someone sees this, what will they think? Finally, I typed words I never imagined I would type. Why do some Muslims become Christians? I almost deleted it before pressing search, but something inside me needed answers more than it feared consequences. When the results appeared, I felt like I had just opened a locked door. That was the night curiosity became stronger than fear for the first time. And I had no idea that one search would begin a journey that would eventually cost me everything I thought was secure. The first night I searched that question, I did not actually click anything for several minutes. I just stared at the screen like it might expose me somehow. My heart was beating so loudly, I was afraid someone in the next room might hear it. Even though my door was locked, fear does not always listen to logic. Fear lives in training. And I had been trained my whole life that certain doors should never be opened. Finally, I clicked one video. My finger hesitated before touching the screen like I was about to touch fire. It was a testimony of a woman who said she had also grown up Muslim. I remember immediately lowering the volume and putting in my earphones, even though everyone else was asleep. That was how deep the fear was. I watched her speak about questions she had been afraid to ask. She spoke about feeling empty while doing everything right. When she spoke about discovering Jesus not as a foreign god, but as someone who saw her pain. I remember pausing the video halfway through because I felt uncomfortable. Not because I hated what she said, because something inside me recognized it. That scared me more than disagreement would have. I closed the video and whispered Astaghfirullah under my breath, asking forgiveness for even listening. I told myself I was only watching to understand how people could be misled. That was the excuse I used to silence my conscience. But the next night I searched again. And the next. Curiosity is quiet at first. Then it becomes persistent. I began reading stories late at night when everyone slept. Stories of people who said they loved Jesus because they felt loved rather than judged. That sentence alone confused me. Loved rather than judged. Religion to me had always been measurement, performance, accountability. I did not understand faith described as relationship. One night I downloaded a Bible app. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. I kept thinking, if my father saw this on my phone. I opened it anyway. I did not know where to start, so I searched the name Isa. I found the name Jesus instead. I began reading small passages slowly, almost like someone reading a forbidden letter. One verse stopped me completely. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I read it 3 times. Rest. That word felt dangerous. Religion had always felt like effort to me, not rest. I quickly deleted the app after reading because guilt rushed in like a storm. I told myself I had gone too far. But 2 days later, I downloaded it again. This became my secret cycle. Download, read, delete, repent, repeat. It sounds almost foolish now, but at the time it felt like walking a thin line between truth and danger. My inner thoughts became a battlefield. One voice said, "This is wrong. Stop now before you destroy your life." Another voice asked, "But what if this is truth?" That second voice would not disappear. I started comparing what I read about Jesus with what I had been taught. I expected to find arrogance. Instead, I found gentleness. I expected to find contradiction. Instead, I found compassion. That confused me more than anything. One night, I fell asleep with my phone still in my hand after reading. That was the first night I had the dream. It felt more real than normal dreams. I was standing in a wide open place filled with soft light. I did not see buildings or people, just light and space. Then I saw a man standing a short distance away. He wore white clothing that moved slightly like it was alive. I could not see his face clearly at first, but I felt something I could not explain. Peace. Not the relief of problems disappearing, but the absence of fear. He did not speak at first. He just looked at me like someone who had been waiting a long time. Then he said my name. Amina. I woke up immediately, my heart racing. My room was dark and silent. I told myself it was just my mind reacting to what I had been reading. But the feeling stayed with me. Not fear, not confusion. Just a strange calm. I tried to ignore it. I stopped reading for a few days. But the questions did not stop. And a week later, the dream came again. This time he asked me something. "Why are you so afraid?" I remember answering in the dream, "Because I could lose everything." He did not argue. He just said, "Truth is still truth even when it costs you." I woke up crying without understanding why. That was when I realized something that frightened me deeply. If what I was discovering was true, my life could never stay the same. Truth is not just information, and truth demands response. And I was beginning to understand that if I continued this path, I might have to choose between what I believed was true and the life I had always known. That was the first time I truly understood the cost might be real. And I had no idea how soon that cost would begin to appear. The dreams did not stop after that. I tried to make them stop. I told myself to stop reading anything about Christianity. I forced myself to listen only to Quran recitations before sleeping like I had always done. I even increased my prayers, hoping discipline would silence whatever was happening inside me. But the more I tried to push the experiences away, the more they seemed to return, not with fear but with a strange patience. About 2 weeks after the second dream, I had another one that changed something inside me. This time I was not standing. I was sitting on the ground with my head in my hands, the way I often sat in real life when my thoughts became too heavy. I remember feeling shame in the dream, the same kind of shame I had carried for months because of my questions. Then I saw white fabric in front of me. I slowly looked up and saw the same man again. This time I could see his face more clearly. There was no anger there, no disappointment, no expression that said I had failed. Only compassion. The kind of compassion I'd spent my life trying to earn, but had never truly felt. He sat down near me, not above me like a judge, but beside me like someone who was not afraid of my weakness. He asked me again, "Why are you carrying so much fear?" I answered honestly this time. "Because if I am wrong, I will lose my family. If I am right, I might still lose them." He nodded slowly like he understood something deeper than my words. Then he said something that stayed with me even after I woke up. "Fear has been your teacher, but love is calling you now." That sentence did not feel like a lecture. It felt like an invitation. I woke up with tears already on my face. I did not understand why I felt loved instead of judged. That confused me more than anything else. I had always believed God's approval came after perfection, but this presence seemed to come before it. I tried not to tell anyone. I knew better than that. In my world, dreams like that would not be seen as spiritual discovery. They would be seen as danger. So I kept everything inside. But silence makes thoughts heavier. Eventually, I needed to speak to someone. Not someone in my world. Someone safe. Someone who did not know my name. That was how I found an online Christian forum. It took me 3 days just to create an account because I was afraid even typing a username could somehow expose me. I chose a fake name. Searching Soul. Even writing that felt too honest. The first message I wrote took me almost an hour. I typed and erased sentences again and again before finally asking a simple question. "Has anyone here come from Islam?" And I almost closed the page after sending it. But within an hour, someone replied. Then another. Then another. Not arguments. Not attacks. Just people telling me they understood fear. One woman wrote, "I know what it feels like to think questions will destroy your life." I remember staring at that sentence for a long time. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Nobody had ever acknowledged the fear behind questions. Over the next weeks, I spoke carefully with a small group there. I never told them where I lived. I never told them my real name. But I told them about the emptiness. About my sister. About the pressure of perfection. They did not try to force me to believe anything. They just listened. That alone felt healing. One of them suggested I read the Gospel of John. I was afraid but curious. I downloaded the Bible app again. This time, I did not delete it immediately. I read slowly, like someone learning a new language of the heart. When I read the words, "Perfect love casts out fear," I had to stop reading. I remember whispering, "What does that even feel like?" Because my entire understanding of faith had always included fear as necessary. But this idea suggested love could replace it. Around that time, my behavior began changing slightly without me realizing it. I smiled less automatically during religious conversations. I hesitated before repeating certain phrases. Small things. But in a family trained to notice spiritual deviation, small things matter. One evening, my mother asked me why I seemed distracted lately. I told her I was just tired from work. That was not entirely a lie. Searching for truth is exhausting when you're afraid of what you might find. The first real sign of danger came when my younger brother jokingly reached for my phone one afternoon. I reacted too quickly, grabbing it back with more force than necessary. Everyone noticed. My father looked at me carefully and asked, "Why so protective?" I forced a small laugh and said it was just work privacy. But inside, fear started growing again. I began clearing my browsing history constantly. I added passwords. I slept lighter. Truth was beginning to feel expensive, and I had not even made a decision yet. A few days later, my mother asked if I was feeling spiritually weak. That question alone told me they sensed something. I said no. But I knew something had changed, and deep inside I also knew something else. Once you begin seeing truth differently, pretending becomes harder. I just did not know how soon pretending would become impossible. Suspicion in a religious family does not begin with accusations. It begins with small observations. Fewer words during religious discussions. Longer pauses before saying, Inshallah. A different look in your eyes when certain topics come up. I did not announce any change, but something in me was no longer performing as perfectly as before, and my family could feel it the way people feel a coming storm before they see clouds. It started one Thursday evening after dinner. My father asked me to sit down again after everyone else stood up. That alone made my stomach tighten. In our house, those conversations were never casual. He spoke calmly, which somehow felt more serious than if he had shouted. He asked if I was struggling spiritually. I said I was just tired from work. He asked if I was still praying all 5 prayers on time. I said yes, which was technically true, though lately my prayers had felt more like questions than rituals. Then he asked to see my phone. My chest felt like it dropped. I tried to keep my face calm as I handed it to him. I had already deleted everything suspicious, but fear does not listen to logic. Fear remembers consequences. He scrolled quietly for several minutes. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, he handed it back and simply said, "Be careful what influences you." That sentence stayed with me because it sounded less like advice and more like a warning. After that, the atmosphere in the house changed, not openly, just slightly colder. My mother began asking more emotional questions. She would sit beside me and say things like, "Amina, you know we raised you with the truth. You would never hurt us by leaving the right path." It was not a question. It was emotional gravity. I would reassure her quickly, even though inside I was no longer sure what the right path meant. One night she cried while talking to me, saying she feared losing me spiritually. Watching her cry felt like someone placing a weight on my chest. This was the part nobody talks about when they talk about faith change. The guilt. The feeling that searching for truth somehow makes you the villain in your own family story. My father became more direct. One evening, he said something I will never forget. "Amina, reputation takes generations to build and one decision to destroy." I understood what he meant. Faith was not just belief in our family. It was identity, loyalty, history. To question it was not just personal. It was seen as betrayal. Around that time, I started noticing my privacy shrinking. My brother began asking more questions about where I was going. My mother would enter my room without knocking more often. It was not violent, it was watchful. And psychologically, that can be just as powerful. My internal struggle became sharper. One voice kept saying, "Just stop this search, delete everything, go back to how things were, you can survive that way." Another voice asked quietly, "But if you know something might be true, can you unknow it just to stay safe?" That question followed me everywhere. One night I sat alone in my room with the lights off, my phone in my hand, my heart racing. I had reached a point where information was no longer enough. I needed clarity. I needed something personal, something real. That was the night I did something that would have terrified the old version of me. I whispered a prayer, not in Arabic, not from memory, not from tradition, just from desperation. I said quietly, "Jesus, if you are real, if you really see me like in those dreams, please show me. I cannot risk everything for something that is not true. But I also cannot ignore what I am feeling. If you are truth, help me find you." If not, let this all disappear. After I said it, I sat there shaking. Part of me expected something dramatic. Nothing happened. No voice, no vision, just silence. But it was a different kind of silence than before. Not empty, just calm. I remember noticing my breathing had slowed. The tightness in my chest eased slightly. For the first time in months, my thoughts were not racing. It was not excitement. It was peace. Small, but real. That scared me almost as much as it comforted me, because peace can make you brave, and bravery can change your life. I realized then something important. This was no longer curiosity. This was becoming a decision, and decisions always have consequences. I went to sleep that night, knowing something inside me had already started choosing, even if I had not said it out loud yet. What I did not know was how soon that private prayer would begin to change things around me, and how quickly private faith can become public when you live in a world where belief is never just personal. After that prayer, I expected confusion. Instead, what came first was quiet. Not the empty silence I'd felt before, but the kind that feels like someone turned down the noise inside your head. My problems were still there. My family was still watching me. My questions were still dangerous. But something inside me was no longer trembling the same way. It is difficult to explain unless you have lived with constant fear. When fear becomes normal, even a small amount of peace feels unnatural. For several days, I said nothing to anyone about what I had done. Outwardly, I continued my routine: prayers, work, family meals, conversations about ordinary things. But inwardly, something had shifted. I found myself thinking about Jesus not as a distant prophet anymore, but as someone who might actually hear me. That thought alone would have terrified me months earlier. Now it just felt honest. A few days later, one of the people from the online group I had been quietly speaking with sent me a link to an online church service. I almost refused to click it. My fear returned immediately. What if this is the step that changes everything? I closed the message 3 times before finally opening it late one night. I turned the brightness on my phone down to the lowest setting and put on my earphones like I was doing something illegal. In many ways, I believed I was. The service was simple. No grand building, no dramatic music. Just a man speaking calmly from a small room about spiritual rebirth. I remember the exact sentence that broke something inside me. He said, "God is not asking you to perform for His love. He is asking you to receive it." I had to pause the video because I started crying without warning. Receive it, not earn it, not prove myself worthy of it, just receive it. That idea felt almost impossible to accept. My entire life I had believed love from God came after obedience, or after discipline, after proving loyalty. But this message suggested love was the starting point. I kept listening. He quoted a verse: "If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, the new has come." New. That word stayed with me. I had spent years trying to become better, stronger, more perfect. But I had never heard faith described as becoming new. I felt something breaking inside my chest, not painfully, but like chains loosening. For the first time, I allowed myself to say something honestly inside my own thoughts. I think I believe this. The moment I admitted that to myself, fear immediately followed. If this is true, your life cannot stay the same. I knew that. Belief is not just agreement. Belief changes direction. That night after the service ended, I did something small but final in my heart. I whispered quietly, "Jesus, I think you are real. I do not understand everything. I am still afraid, but I believe you are showing me truth." I expected fear to explode after saying that. Instead, the same calm returned, stronger this time. Not excitement, not emotion, just a steady sense that I was not alone anymore. I slept deeply that night for the first time in months. No dreams, just rest. But peace does not mean absence of consequences. The next morning, my mother asked me suddenly why I looked different. That question froze me. I asked what she meant. She said, "You look calmer. Where is that coming from?" I did not know how to answer without revealing too much. I just said I had been thinking a lot about life. She studied my face like she was trying to read something I had not said. That was the first moment I realized something important. Inner change eventually shows outward. You cannot hide peace any easier than you can hide fear. Over the next week, I found myself less afraid of my own thoughts. But I also noticed my family becoming more alert. My brother once walked into my room unexpectedly while I was reading the Bible on my phone. I locked the screen so quickly, he asked why I looked nervous. I laughed it off, but my hands were shaking after he left. I knew then this secret could not stay hidden forever. Truth has a way of surfacing, and deep down, I knew I had already made my choice, even if I had not yet spoken it aloud. What I did not know was how quickly that hidden decision would be forced into the open and how costly honesty would soon become. The moment my secret stopped being private did not happen dramatically. There was no announcement, no confession, no planned conversation. It happened because truth changes you, and eventually people notice change before they hear explanation. My exposure began with something small. One evening during Maghrib prayer, my father asked me to lead the family recitation of a short surah like I had done many times before. Normally, I would begin immediately. That night I hesitated, only for 2 seconds. But in a house trained to notice spiritual discipline, 2 seconds is a very long time. I completed the recitation correctly, but afterward my father asked why I had paused. I said I had lost my focus. He did not answer, but his eyes stayed on me longer than usual. 2 days later, everything broke open. I had fallen asleep while reading on my phone and forgotten to close the Bible app. My younger brother came into my room looking for a charger and saw the screen light up with a verse. He did not shout. He did not ask me first. He simply walked out. Within an hour, my father called me into the sitting room. My mother was already crying before I even sat down. My phone was on the table between them like evidence in a trial. My father's voice was controlled, which made it more frightening. He asked one question. How long? I knew lying would only delay what was already happening. I said quietly, months. My mother began crying harder. She kept saying, "What did we do wrong?" That question hurt more than anger would have, because I knew she believed my search for truth was a failure of their parenting, not an honest struggle of my heart. My father asked if I believed what I was reading. I took a long breath because I knew my answer would change everything. I said, yes. Silence filled the room like pressure. My brother looked at me like I had become a stranger. My father asked if I understood what leaving Islam meant. I said I did. He said, "It means losing your family." That sentence felt like a blade, even though I had already feared it. He called a local imam the next day. I was not asked if I wanted that meeting. It was arranged like an intervention. The imam arrived with calm confidence, the kind of man used to correcting people. He asked me many questions about what I had read. He tried to point out what he believed were contradictions in Christianity. Months earlier, I would have been too afraid to answer. But something strange had happened inside me. I was no longer trying to win arguments. I was simply telling the truth of what I had experienced. I told him I was not changing faith because of one debate or one book. I told him I could not deny the peace I had felt after asking Jesus to reveal truth. He told me peace could be deception. I answered quietly. Fear controlled my faith before. This peace feels different. My father became frustrated. He asked if I was choosing strangers on the internet over my own blood. That question broke my heart because I was not choosing people. I was choosing what I believed was truth. But explaining that difference to someone who sees belief as loyalty is almost impossible. That night, my mother refused to eat. She told me she felt like I had died. I went to my room and cried until I could barely breathe. Nobody prepares you for the grief of being rejected by people who are still alive. It feels like mourning without a funeral. Over the next weeks, the distance in the house became official. Conversations became short. My choices were questioned. I was warned about shame, about consequences, about what people would say, but something else was growing inside me too. Not rebellion, not anger, just courage, quiet courage, the kind that comes when fear stops being your master. I realized something important during that time. Faith is easy when it costs nothing. Faith becomes real when it costs everything. One evening, my father told me a final meeting would happen with a senior religious authority from our community. He said it was my last chance to correct my path. I understood what that meant. It was not just a discussion. It was a line being drawn. That night, I sat alone and prayed again, not for escape, but for strength. I said, "Jesus, I am afraid, but I cannot pretend anymore. If I lose everything, please do not let me lose you." I felt that same quiet peace again, not removing the consequences, just giving me strength to face them. And I knew the next conversation would decide what my life would look like from that moment forward. The day of the final meeting felt heavier than any day I can remember. Not because I did not know what was coming, but because I did. When you know a moment may separate your old life from your future, even breathing feels different. The meeting took place in the home of a respected elder connected to our local religious leadership. I was not invited as an equal voice. I was brought as someone who needed correction. My father sat straight beside me, his silence louder than words. My mother's eyes were red from crying. Two older men I had known since childhood were there, along with the imam I had already spoken with, and another senior scholar whose presence alone carried authority. Nobody shouted. That would have been easier. Instead, they spoke calmly, like doctors explaining a serious illness. The senior scholar began by asking me gently if I understood the seriousness of what I was doing. I said yes. He asked if I believed Islam was false. I answered carefully. I believe Jesus is showing me truth I cannot deny. He tried another approach. He spoke about family duty, about how faith protects society, about how individual belief cannot be separated from community responsibility. I listened respectfully. And months earlier, I might have agreed just to end the pressure. But something inside me refused to pretend anymore. When they finished speaking, they asked me to explain myself. My hands were cold, but my voice came out steady. I said, "All my life, I believed God wanted perfection from me. I lived afraid of failing Him. But when I began asking questions, I did not find rebellion. I found a different kind of love. Not a love I earned. A love I felt before I deserved it." One of the men said feelings cannot determine truth. I agreed. I said that is why I searched, read and prayed before making any decision. I told them I had asked Jesus to show me truth if He was real, and what followed was peace I had never known in years of trying to be perfect. The senior scholar asked if I understood the consequences of refusing to return to Islam. I said quietly, "I do." He asked one final question. "Will you come back?" That was the moment everything became simple. Not easy, but simple. I thought about my childhood, my sister's pain, my hidden questions, the dreams, the peace after that first prayer. And I realized something important. I was no longer choosing between two religions. I was choosing between fear and truth. I answered, "I cannot deny what I believe God has shown me." My mother began crying again. My father closed his eyes like he was absorbing a physical blow. Nobody threatened me. Nobody touched me. But something final passed through the room. Separation without violence, disowning without shouting. The scholar nodded slowly, like a man acknowledging a decision he could not change. He said, then you must accept the path you have chosen. On the drive home, nobody spoke. The silence felt like a funeral procession. When we arrived, my father said something that hurt more than anger would have. He said, "You are still my daughter, but you are no longer under my protection." In our culture, that sentence carries deep meaning. It meant emotional distance, independence, and loss. That night, I packed a small bag because I understood what was happening, even without dramatic words. My mother hugged me before I left. She whispered, "I hope one day you come back." I whispered back, "I hope one day you understand." I left with tears blurring everything around me. I stayed temporarily with someone I trusted from outside my family circle. Alone in that unfamiliar room that night, the weight of everything finally hit me. I had not just changed beliefs. I had lost the life I always knew. I cried harder than I ever had, asking God if truth was supposed to hurt this much. And in that exhaustion, something unexpected happened. Not a voice, not a dream. Just a deep, quiet assurance inside me that I had not actually become alone. That night, I realized something I had never understood before. Sometimes following God does not remove loss. Sometimes it walks you through it. And even in that grief, I knew I could not go back to pretending. In the weeks after I left my family home, I often thought about the moment in the hospital when I believed I had died. At first, I treated it like a strange experience caused by stress or my medical condition. But the more I reflected on everything that had happened since then, the more I began to understand it differently. I had not just experienced a physical crisis, I had experienced the beginning of a spiritual awakening. The words Jesus spoke in that moment began making more sense to me over time. "You asked for your reward, so I'm showing you the truth." Back then, I thought reward meant comfort, approval, and certainty that I had done enough. Now I was beginning to understand something deeper. Maybe the greatest reward God could give someone searching honestly is truth, even when truth changes everything. My new life did not suddenly become easy. I had to learn how to live independently in ways I never had before. I had to build friendships outside the only social world I had ever known. Some nights loneliness would come like waves. I missed my mother's voice. I missed ordinary family conversations. I even missed the familiar sounds of our home. A loss does not disappear just because you believe you made the right decision. But something else was growing alongside the grief. Peace. Real peace. Not the fragile peace of everything going your way, but the steady peace of knowing you are no longer pretending. Through the online Christian community I had quietly joined, I began attending small private gatherings with other believers who also came from Muslim backgrounds. For the first time in my life, I spoke openly about my questions without fear of punishment. Nobody forced me to perform righteousness. Nobody measured my worth by perfection. They spoke about grace like it was real. One woman gave me a small Arabic New Testament. Inside the cover, she wrote a verse that became very personal to me. "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." I used to think freedom meant doing whatever you want. Now I understood freedom can also mean finally living without fear controlling your conscience. A few months later, I made another decision that felt just as serious as my first prayer to Jesus. I chose to be baptized quietly among this small group. There was no large church building, no public announcement, just a few people in a private place, praying softly. When I stepped into the water, my hands were trembling. Not from doubt, from understanding what it meant. This was not rebellion against my past. It was a declaration of what I now believed was true. Before I went under the water, I whispered a simple prayer. "Jesus, I lost many things following you, but I found peace I never had before. Please help me live honestly from now on. When I came up from the water, I did not feel fireworks or dramatic emotion, just the same calm I had felt the night I first prayed. But this time it felt deeper, like something inside me had finally stopped running. Healing did not happen overnight. I had to forgive my family slowly, sometimes painfully. Forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. It is choosing not to let bitterness become your identity. I still pray for them. I still hope one day they will see I did not leave because I hated them or my past. I left because I could not ignore what I believed God was showing me. Today, when I look back, I realize I did not lose my life the way I feared. I lost an identity built on fear, and I found one built on grace. If you're listening to my story and you're standing at your own crossroads, afraid of what truth might cost you, I want you to hear this from someone who understands that fear. Yes, truth can cost you comfort. Yes, it can cost you approval. Sometimes it can even cost relationships you thought would last forever. But peace has a value that cannot be measured by what you lose. And God's love is not something you earn by being perfect. It is something you discover when you finally stop pretending. I once thought I was losing everything. But now I understand something I could not see before. I thought I was losing my life. I was finally finding it.